Hello and welcome. My name is Ilda and I'm a partner in the Immigration Department at Kingsley Napley. Given that from the 1st of January 2021, British citizens travelling into Europe will be deemed as third country nationals, UK law firms who regularly send British national lawyers to provide advice to their clients in Europe will first need to check whether work permission is required in advance of their travels. This is because every country in Europe has their own immigration rules. Equally, they should check whether there is any requirement to register with the local law society. To that end, I'm really delighted to say that I have with me today two very esteemed colleagues. Firstly, Pierre Elvinger from Elvinger Hoss at Prus, a law firm based in Luxembourg, as well as my colleague, Julie Norris, a partner in our regulatory department. Julie will be covering and answering a few questions from a regulatory standpoint, and then I will turn to Pierre in terms of what is the immigration standpoint for British lawyers flying into Luxembourg on a fly-in, fly-out basis. I firstly turn to my colleague, Julie Norris. I have for you, Julie, three questions in relation to the position of the regulatory position where and what British lawyers should be aware of when flying in to Luxembourg. Julie.
From a regulatory perspective, following the 1st of January 2021, UK regulated and registered solicitors who wish to go to Luxembourg to advise their clients on a temporary or a fly-in, fly-out basis are going to face some uncertainty, I'm afraid. That's because when we read the provisions together, they are suggestive of the fact that in order to provide legal services in Luxembourg, lawyers need to be registered in Luxembourg. So if you're a UK regulated solicitor, strictly speaking, the rules do not allow you to fly in and give advice on UK, EU or international law. However, that's not the complete picture, and the Law Society of England and Wales in the research that they have done, that they are happy to share, is that temporary practice does go on a regular basis, as you would expect in Luxembourg, and the current leadership of the Luxembourg City Bar seem to be quite relaxed about it. So we have the bright line rules which prohibit, yet we're aware, or the Law Society at least are aware of practice which seems to be more permissive. That leaves a good deal of uncertainty in our view for UK solicitors and their firms, and there are risks. There are risks to lawyers through complaints from competitors or indeed clients. So that is the position. It's unsatisfactory and it is unclear. If lawyers want to de-risk the situation, UK solicitors can still advise remotely on UK and international law. So we can do this, we can Zoom, we can pick up the telephone as we could before, but not importantly on EU law. So no remote advice to clients based in Luxembourg or residing in Luxembourg on EU law, because to do that you need registration as an advocate at the Luxembourg Bar. So again, this is quite complicated and needs to be approached with care. If a UK solicitor determines that it is safe and permissible to go to Luxembourg on a fly-in, fly-out basis, the most important thing to consider, as with fly-in, fly-out advice to most of the EU27, is that LPP does not apply. So that protective wrapper of privilege is not going to automatically apply to your meetings or your conversations. And the advice we're giving across the piece is that fly-in, fly-out solicitors going to Luxembourg may wish to attend meetings with local lawyers to ensure that they do have the protection of privilege vis-a-vis their client communications.
Thank you, Julie. Pierre, thank you very much for your time and your expertise. The first question I have from you, just as an immigration expert, is do you have any top tips for UK law firms that need to send their British lawyers into Luxembourg after the transition period ends?
Thank you, Ilda, for addressing the questions. Yes, I think one of the first thing to deal with is you have to have a valid ID card. and you have to have it valid for the coming 6 months when entering Luxembourg, so that there's no issues with the authorities to enter the territory. Then I think you should have private health care, which is important if something arrives on an accident, and you should have social security coverage, which is important when coming to Luxembourg, because you will not be covered by Luxembourg social security system, so it's important to have your personal coverage. I think in addition, and that is in relation to working on Luxembourg law or UK law in Luxembourg, the best thing is to have a correspondent law firm with whom you work and with whom you would meet clients in Luxembourg.
Thank you. Let's assume for a moment that the British lawyer is only going to be travelling into Luxembourg in order to visit the client that's based in Luxembourg. There's no plans to give any form of advice. What is the maximum number of days that they're allowed to spend in Luxembourg?
Well, you should not exceed the 90 days over a period of 180 days period. So that's the threshold. You should not go beyond. So from a perspective flying in, flying out, that should not be an issue. But you should make your calculations when you travel a lot, Luxembourg or other EU companies, that you should have, so you should make the relevant calculations.
Thank you. Does that mean that as a British citizen, as of the 1st of January, do I get a visitor visa on arrival in Luxembourg, or how will that work in practice?
No, you will not have any visa. There's only, you can come into the territory of Luxembourg with your passport or with your ID card. That's enough. No specific documents to be organized in this respect from an immigration perspective.
Thank you. Will the position then be different, assuming the British lawyer is flying into Luxembourg in order to provide chargeable advice to the client based in Luxembourg? And that could be chargeable advice. It could be that they need to draft some documentation. Even if it's only for a few days, will work permission then be required?
Well, from a pure immigration perspective, there is no requirement to be made in this respect, as long as you don't go beyond the threshold I just mentioned before, and you do not work, you do not exceed work during 3 months, continuous 3 months for a year period. So you, in this respect, I think on fly in, fly out, there's no issue from an immigration perspective, but from a regulatory perspective, as we just heard, it's really very constrained, and there will be problems in this respect if you start working, except you have your corresponding firm you work with together. Then I think that should solve the issue from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. I suppose, I think you've made it very clear about the limitation and the number of days that one can spend then in Luxembourg, the 90 out of 180 day rule. But if there are exceptionally frequent travellers, and that can happen where you've got a lawyer that does need to travel into Luxembourg, let's say they're travelling maybe once or twice a week because there's a big project on the go, what would your advice be in that situation?
Well, my advice would be to keep a very clear register when you come into Luxembourg, when you go out to Luxembourg, and also other EU countries, that you do not fall into, so that you can always very clearly say, didn't go beyond the threshold, and I have no issue on authorizations, and so you need to show that you didn't go beyond the 100 and the 90 days over the 180 period, or the 3 months in a year's period regarding the working time. So registration is really important.
Okay, okay. Assuming I exceed those thresholds and I now need a work permit, just on a practical, how long does it take to secure a work permit for Luxembourg?
I would say in an average you would take not more than 3 months. So not an average, it's really not more than 3 months, because that's the delay within which the authorities have to respond. My experience is that it takes in between 6 weeks and 8 weeks, but they can go take up to 3 months.
Thank you. And is that something that you have to apply for in advance of travel to Luxembourg, or can you just obtain or apply when you are in Luxembourg?
No, you have to apply it when you are outside the country of Luxembourg. So you need to take the necessary steps already before coming to Luxembourg.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is really, really helpful. I can see how there are these benefits of the thresholds will definitely help law firms. I think the problems that I possibly foresee is going to be that the fact that if there are going to be frequent travellers and they are going to be exceeding the thresholds that you've just described, and perhaps they didn't foresee it, the difficulty is going to be actually trying to secure the work permit when there might not be enough time for that. Are there any kind of suggestions, any practical tips, if all else fails, anything you would suggest?
I really would highly recommend to work together with a local law firm, so that you can always refer thereto by justifying that you're visiting Luxembourg, you are visiting a corresponding lawyer with whom you deal together on joint clients, and I think that should solve the major problems in this respect.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much to Pierre, thank you very much to my colleague Julie, and thank you very much to all of you for listening. Please be on the lookout for our next podcast, where we will be covering what the issue is with fly-in, fly-out lawyers in other jurisdictions. Thank you.